Welcome to another episode of The People Behind the Books, the show where we step away from the credits and calculations to meet the humans who power the tax and accounting world. Everyday stories, meaningful conversations, and a reminder that behind every tax return is a person with a story. I'm your host, Yehuda. Let's meet today's guest. Welcome, Jeremy, to The People Behind the Books. I like telling people that part of my goal with The People Behind the Books is that if somebody were to meet you at a conference or meet you in the real world, and they'd be able to come up to you and say, "Hey, I heard your podcast recording. I'm pretty sure I know you. I know what you're about. I know what you do." And now people maybe will feel a little bit more comfortable meeting other people at conferences and in other places where we tend to meet other accountants. So welcome. I'm really excited to get to spend a little bit of time with you and learn a little bit more. You and I we do know each other as part of the National Association of Enrolled Agents. We have met up before. Jeremy, I know you're very active online, and it's great seeing all the content you've been coming out with. You have your own podcast, as well as your recent ascension to being the editor for the EA journal with NAEA, which is really, really exciting. And I'm excited to see the upcoming fall edition of the EA journal that is going to be coming out in the next few weeks. So why don't we just start? Let's go. One of the things I like doing at the beginning of each episode is going back to the beginning. Give us a little bit of your background, not just like your scholastic background, but where are you originally from? Where did you grow up? And how did that contribute towards your journey of getting into the accounting and tax world?
Wow, so you want to go all the way
We're going
back.
all the way back. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. I really
sure.
appreciate it. Always love doing these kinds of talks. I learn more about the profession, other people in the profession, as well as myself when I do these things. So always excited to see more of these kinds of opportunities out there in our profession. Okay. Originally, I'm from a small town in western Kentucky called Hopkinsville. It's about an hour northwest of Nashville, Tennessee. So I spent a lot of time in and around Nashville and that area growing up. A lot of time out in the wilderness, the land between the lakes, if you're from that area. And being from Kentucky, I grew up a UK fan, had to, UK basketball. Never have cared much for football, but basketball and baseball have always been big for me. And, growing up, going through school, like to read, like to write, was pretty decent at school. College was a given. And the only question was, what was I actually going to do with that? Uh, when you're a teenager, you're kind of thinking, what can I do that's going to make me a big deal and make me a lot of money and that sort of stuff. And where I came from, some of the most well-off people, like in a lot of small towns, were the attorneys, the doctors, just some of the accountants, not so much, but they weren't on the radar as much. But definitely law school was appealing. So when I was an undergrad at Berea College, a small liberal arts college in Eastern Kentucky, my first go at a major was political science. It was the closest thing I could find that to pre-law, and I was going to do that with a business minor because I wanted to do contract law. I didn't want to do litigation. I mean, I grew up watching Matlock with my dad. That seemed fun, but I didn't want to be doing, up in front of the courtroom kind of law. I wanted to be doing the kind of everyday law that would help people and businesses. And to me, that seemed more like contract law, the boring, mundane kind of stuff. But to me, that kind of nerdy, geeky stuff has always been more fun. So
Right, because
that's
in a
what
way,
I,
it's foundational to everything
yeah,
in the business world.
absolutely right. So that's what I thought I'd be specializing in. Except the first semester, I took the 200 level business law class taught by one of the professors in the business department. And even though the course itself was fine, I just didn't get along with her. And I knew that I was going to have to take at least one or two more classes with her. And that wasn't going to work. And so I ended up just dropping the business minor and focusing solely on political science, which turned out fine because I graduated with that degree. And then I ended up getting accepted to Louisiana State University's graduate political science program. And instead of doing law school, I did grad school. And instead of doing contract law, I was studying international relations. So, how countries interact with each other, war, trade, alliances, all that kind of fun stuff.
I just want
Yeah.
to interrupt you real quick.
Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned that because now that we can like fast forward to the future, here we are doing taxes. One of the things that comes up pretty often is, oh, check which treaty that country has for taxes. And you probably have all this background knowledge of like maybe having a better understanding of where that treaty even came from. How did that came to be that thing happened? And we just look at it like we're just finding the list and figuring out what's going on. But you have all that background knowledge you can utilize to actually do people's taxes and interact and figure out which ones do we want to touch and which ones do we not want to touch.
Yeah. I mean, so there were, to kind of finish that part of my life out, right? It took me 6 years. Baton Rouge, LSU, very fun place to be as a young adult. I had just turned 21, graduated from college, and got there for grad school, and had a lot of fun. And it wound up getting after 6 years. I probably should have finished in 4, maybe 5 years, but it took me 6. I wasn't in a rush to get out of that part of the country. Still really love and miss Southern Louisiana, but I got a job teaching at Texas State University, teaching international relations and political science there, and taught there for about 5 years. Now, in the last couple of years of grad school, I started teaching as well. That's just part of going through a graduate program. You have to learn not just to do the research and academic stuff, but also the teaching, of course. Really enjoyed teaching. My college experience was a small liberal arts college, so I was in small seminar focused kind of classes. Most of my classes had 8, 10, 12 people in them. It was not, I had one class that had I want to say 50 or 60 people, and that was the big sort of general studies science, natural science class that everybody had to take, and that was the biggest class I was in as an undergraduate. So when I got my first teaching job at Texas State University, this big state, Central Texas, big state school, 30 something thousand students. I was being assigned, the smallest classes I ever taught were 30, 35, 40 students.
A
So
little
the
larger than
smallest
what
classes
you're
I
used to.
taught was almost as big as the biggest class I was ever taking as an undergraduate. It was a completely different experience. But what really stood out to me as the enjoyable part of that work was the office hours, being able to talk to students one-on-one. And a lot of those conversations would go beyond just the sort of, why did I not do as well on this exam as I thought I did? Or, I need help getting this paper done. There was some of that, to be sure, but a lot of those conversations would expand beyond that. What do you even want your major to be? What are your career goals? What are your life goals? What are you trying to get out of this? And it was those conversations that I seemed to get the most fulfillment out of. And it was those conversations that always seemed to have the most, lasting impression on the students that lectures were fine. There were some class, some of those class meetings were fine. And, but it was so up and down, right? It was always easy one lecture to feel like I really nailed that topic, and then the next lecture feel like it just fell completely flat. Office hours, there was always a little bit of, like that. I'm glad we did this, right? I'm glad we had this conversation. So that combined with, the realities of working in academia, which is a whole separate conversation. But it just wasn't. The longer I was in it, the more I realized it wasn't a good fit for me, especially at that kind of university. I never saw myself teaching at a big university. I graduated from a high school class of 22. I graduated from an undergraduate class of about 400, right?
Oh,
And then I went into this grad school program where I was in a cohort of maybe about a dozen. So, I've always been in relatively small, close knit educational environments.
yeah.
And here I am at just this big state university where, everybody's just a number. Nobody really knows who anybody is. I knew that wasn't a good fit. So I started looking for alternatives. And, one of the first places mentally that I went to of if I were doing something else besides this, what would that be? Well, I thought back to what the original plan was when I got to college, right? Was to do law, but I had just finished a graduate degree program, and I had the student loan debt to prove it, and I didn't want to do more school, and at that point I was married with a kid, so I knew making us move because I don't think we have any online law school programs yet. And so getting into law school and doing that would mean having to move my family again somewhere. And I didn't want to do that. So I started looking for alternatives that would work for, where we were and the kind of lifestyle I wanted to have. And I fell back on during that time when I was a business minor, one of the classes I took was accounting one. It is a very introduction to debits, credits, T accounts, that sort of stuff. So I looked, the university I was teaching at had a pretty decent accounting department. They'd had pretty good placements in the regional firms in the area because we were situated right between Austin, San Antonio, Houston, right in that central part of Texas. So I spent the next couple semesters taking classes there and networking with as many accountants that I could. And a lot of that was in person. I was reaching out to CPAs. I started doing this in the spring of 2017. All right. So this is like January, February, and I'm sending emails to CPAs in town that I can find. I'm not getting any response, nothing back at all. And I'm thinking, what is up with this? Am I like, is something wrong with my email? I'm trying to figure it out. Now looking back, I know, right? Like you don't email your local CPA in February. They're a little busy, right? During
That's
that time.
great. Like, come
And
on, do
so
you not
no,
like me?
yeah,
Why are you not
right.
answering my email? Like, do you not
No
know it's
wonder none
tax
of these
season?
people, yeah, nobody wanted to have get coffee with me for half an hour,
It's awesome.
for to talk about going into accounting, right, when they're in the busiest part of the year. But anyway, and so I did have some conversations, and one of them was actually online with someone I met through Twitter, and it was a couple days of going back and forth in the DMs, and then that turned into about a 90-minute phone call in the summer of 2017, and that person ended up being my mentor. And it was in that conversation where he told me, look, when it and that he was a CPA, he is a CPA, but it was, look, most people think when they go into accounting they need to get a CPA, but there's this other thing I'm going to tell you about. And it's not necessarily an easier way into the field, but it's a quicker way. You can probably get it done by the end of the year. And if so, this is going into late 2017. He said, if so, then when we get into the next year, 2018, I'll start sending you work. If you want to do this. I said, fine, So I ended up studying for, and what he was talking about was the EA, right? Being an enrolled
Yeah.
agent. Uh, so I found a study guide online,
You
bought
said
it.
this was you
Yeah,
said this was 2017.
2017. Yeah,
Okay.
2017. Yeah, yeah.
So now
And
I'm trying to picture how you got to where you are today, and it's only been like 7, 8 years. That's amazing.
yeah, it's been a little bit of a whirlwind. The last eight or so years. I mean, at the same time, right? Summer of 2017 is when our daughter was born. So we'd been living in Central Texas for a few years at that point. We just bought our house in Texas in summer of 2016. We had our daughter summer of 2017. And in the middle of all this, I'm having a little bit of a midlife crisis and trying to figure out the job I had teaching at Texas State University was fine, right? I could still be in that job. I could retire or die in that job if I wanted to, but I didn't want to, and so I was I was looking for something different, and yeah, so there were a lot of changes going on, but I spent that next year from mid 17 to mid 18. Yeah, it spent the rest of 2017 studying for the exam, took the exam, passed all three parts on the first try. So I ended up getting the license very early 2018. And my mentor, Andrew Carroll, he helped me set up my firm, started referring. He was at capacity for himself. He just kept his firm just himself. And he was at capacity, but still getting leads in. So he started forwarding leads to me. And in the meantime, basically brought me on as a contractor in his firm to do the initial preparation and data entry for his firm's returns, which gave me experience. Now he focused on S corporations and 1040s for the shareholders, right? A lot of small solo S corporations. That's really how I got my start, was just doing a bunch of those. Now this whole time I'm still teaching at Texas State University. And I'm taking accounting classes in the accounting department in the business school at Texas State University. And I'm
The
starting
students
up
are
my
like,
own
what's
firm.
this guy doing here? I thought he's a professor.
I literally took a few classes in the accounting department with some of the same kids that were students in my class that same semester. So I was classmate and instructor for some of those students at the same time. It was a little interesting, but it was. I went into it. I was a blank slate, right? I had never taken a business class. I had never run a business. I had no business acumen or knowledge or anything. So I was a blank slate. I came in there. I acted like I was a freshman, right? It was my first year in college, right? As an accounting student, but it was good. Did that for a couple semesters, and then summer of 18, we daughter was about to turn one. At that point, I knew accounting tax was for me, not teaching. So I resigned from that position. And I'm from Kentucky. My wife's parents at the time were in Central Georgia. We did not want to be in Texas. We were 1,000 miles from the closest family. So we moved to Northeast Florida, where we knew my in-laws were going to retire, and we set up here. And that's pretty much been where we've at. And I've been running my firm, and doing that. So that pretty much gets us up to the pandemic, right? And that was wild. Running a relatively new accounting firm during the pandemic, and I'd only been doing this a couple of years at that point, but I'd had really good mentorship. I felt fairly competent at what I was doing. But then, the entire profession had no idea what was going on, because we had pandemic relief, we had EIDLs, we had PPL.
All of a sudden, everyone's
we
getting their virtual office up and running and
right,
scanning and
everybody, all the stuff that for the past couple of years just seemed natural to me, right? Because
totally.
I never had a physical in-person location. I just did it from home, right? All of my client meetings were Zoom calls, right? All of our communication was through the portal or email. So all of the things that the rest of the profession kind of stumbled into and struggled to figure out in 2020, 2021, that's how I'd been taught to operate.
Right.
How do we figure out the pricing? How do we bill people for all this work that we're doing that's not just preparing their tax returns or doing their bookkeeping, because we're helping them with loan applications, we're helping them with paycheck protection loan forgiveness applications, we're doing all this. The way I was brought up into the profession by my mentor was just flat monthly billing and value pricing. So I was already pricing the relationship. I was already doing
You
all
were
inclusive work.
way ahead of the
And
curve.
the thing about it is I had no idea that I was. I had, right, because that's just how I was. Like I was literally just born into the profession
It's
from
amazing.
that mindset. I've never tracked time. I've never billed for time. I've never invoiced a client. I've never not gotten paid up front. So when I talk to other firm owners and they're telling me about struggling with collections, or they don't know how to price this particular service, or they're tired of time tracking, it's Friday, they got to turn in their timesheets, all of that is just a completely strange world to me. But
It's
so
amazing.
over the years, I've learned to have some empathy for my colleagues, even though I've never had to deal with any of that. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's insane. I think if I had to, for some reason, go work for a firm that made me turn in timesheets on Friday and then turned around and billed for that, I would lose my mind. But that's also part of the great thing about this profession is we're at a point now to where mentally, technologically, we're just capable of doing within the bounds of our ethics and best practices and all that. You can run your accounting firm however you want. You can run it solo. You can try to scale to be a top 100 firm. You can bill for time. You can bill for perform. You can bill for value. You can price however you want. You can do representation. You can do preparation. You can do advisory. You can do planning, right? You can do none of the above. You can come up with your own, set of services that you want to offer. That's none of that. So because at the same time, so I started off as an EA, right? Got that in 2018. Still had CPA, in the back of my mind, even though by this point I knew, and I'd been told by a few others that it wasn't necessary, right? I could
Right.
have, a solid, long, successful career as just an EA, and that was fine. I'm the type where I would have always wondered, right? Would it have made a difference? And I had done enough schooling, right? At that point, I had a PhD. I had done enough school to where I knew that the education part wouldn't be an issue. I'd taken enough standardized exams to know that passing the exam wouldn't be an issue. So I said, let's go for it. And I did sign up for the University of North Carolina has an online Master of Accountancy program. And
Nice.
remember, other than a few classes that I'd taken while I was still teaching Tech State, I had no business classes on my transcript at all, right? So I was starting pretty
Mm.
much from scratch when it came to the education part. So I just got as much of that as I could as quickly as I could. Took the exams. I had to take audit 3 times. No surprise there because I'd never done any audit work. But the other 3, the FAR, Reg, and Beck, I passed those 3 on the first try.
Nice.
So got through the exams in under a year, got the license, and yeah, I've been an EA CPA ever since. Nothing changed. Absolutely nothing changed. As
You
far
hear that, everybody? Nothing
absolutely
changed.
nothing changed. So and I get this quite because I put both of them there, and I put EA first for a couple of reasons. One, it's a federal license versus a state license, so just technically EA goes first in the
That's a good
pecking
point.
order,
I always
right?
wondered how people decided
Well,
what they put
and I've looked
first.
this up. Right? So it's supposed to be academic degrees, then licenses in order of seniority, right? And so a federal license is going to come before a state license. So that's why I do
Interesting.
EA CPA. But I
Okay.
also for just for the sake of continuing to try to raise awareness of that license of our community of enrolled agents, I do put that one first. And I will occasionally, probably once or twice a month, I'll get a DM on some social media network, or I'll get an email from somebody, and it's usually somebody that has one license or the other, or it's an accounting student, and they'll ask me, "Hey, I noticed you've got both. Why did you decide to do that?" And the honest response is, I didn't really decide. It wasn't like an intentional thing. I just kind of fell into that because I started off thinking, well, I'm going into accounting. I need to be a CPA, and then I got told, well, there's this other thing you could do, so try that. So I became an EA, and I never intended to not be a CPA. It just the EA, just time wise was just quicker, and I got that first, and then that happened. But yeah, absolutely. When I got the CPA, after being an EA for at that point about 3-4 years, nothing changed. It's not like the money just started rolling in. It's not like the clients all of a sudden showed up. Nothing about the work got any easier. That's for sure. I've still never done any audit work, or any attestation, assurance work, anything like that. The closest is I've done. I had a client that. Before he asked me, decided to bring in a partner into his S corporation, and then after about 6 months, they decided that wasn't working out, and so now the soon-to-be ex-partner needed to get out of it, and they needed to figure out what that transaction was going to look like, and they wanted and you need to get a valuation of what that is going to cost to buy out the other partner. So I worked with another CPA who is a certified valuation analyst, a CVA, and he sort of mentored me through that process of here's what valuing a business looks like. And there's some, AICPA has some resources on that. I was a member of AICPA at the time. I'm not anymore. Just because AICPA doesn't really focus on what I do. I run a small firm that's focused on helping small business owners. And there's definitely a lot of that, a lot of members of AICPA are doing that kind of work. I was in some small firm owner groups in AICPA. I just didn't really feel like I was getting as much value out of that. And besides, at the time, I was a member of AICPA, National Association of Tax Professionals, NATP, and of course, National Association of Enrolled Agents, NAEA. And all those dues were coming up at around the same time, within about a month of each other. And I said, something needs to go, right? And so, yeah, I've been a member of NATP and NAEA now. But yeah, I think those two organizations of any. So if you're a small firm owner and you're looking for, a way to connect and network with professionals, if you're an EA, definitely recommend NAEA. I can't imagine. I know, a lot of EAs that have been members of NAEA have issues. Every organization has issues. Every member of every organization has criticisms and issues with that organization. I think membership is the way we resolve those issues, and speaking up as members. I don't think leaving the organization and then continuing to complain about it, from outside the organization is the best
People
way
love
to handle
complaining,
that.
that's for sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. But, and I get that some people have legitimate issues with particular people or decisions or way things are run in those organizations. Yeah, I just haven't run into any of that, or at least I haven't yet, right?
Right,
And
right.
if I do, I might reevaluate my position. But for now, NAEA and ATP, that's where I'm spending my time. Those are the two organizations I'm telling colleagues, people that I meet at conferences, at events, or just online. Hey, if you're looking for a place to meet other people going through similar issues to you, that's where I'm talking to people. So, come on in. The water's fine.
Yeah. I want to take a break for a second to tell you about TaxDome. TaxDome is the all-in-one platform for practice management made for accountants. Whether you're a solo tax preparer or run a whole team, it's the perfect tool to keep you and your jobs organized. Whether you need to send out engagement letters, invoices, or organizers, TaxDome has you covered. Before TaxDome, my job list was a mess and things were constantly falling through the cracks. Now I always know exactly which job to do, and I have all my tasks in order. Get rid of repetitious tasks with templates for everything from emails to chats to job descriptions. Everything you need right there, so you can spend more time getting work done and less time trying to remember which steps you might have missed. If you want to try it out, check out the link in the show notes. When you sign up, you'll get an extra 30 days added to your subscription. TaxDome, the most powerful platform to manage teams, clients, and projects. Sign up today using the link in the show notes for an extra 30 days added to your subscription. And now back to the show. I want to go back to something earlier that you mentioned, how you were saying that when you were teaching your students, some of the best times that you had with them was when you were having those one-on-one office hours, or, with a couple of students. And what you're describing there is how I feel when I go to in-person events.
Yeah.
It's just a completely different experience. It's a great opportunity to meet someone, and I contrast it with how we have online interactions that are so opinionated and formal and specific, and then you get to meet somebody and you see their body language and you see that they have nuance, and you also see everything else about them, and it's a completely different world. And I think what's nice in the profession that we're in is we have an opportunity to do similar things with our actual clients. Is we get to meet them, maybe it might even be virtually, but we get to meet them one on one and help like speak to their needs and walk them through what they need to go through, because they're scared the IRS is going to come after them. So why don't you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about the day-to-day schedule of what it's like, what you're doing right now. I know you have a lot going on. You have your tax podcast, which is fantastic. If anybody hasn't checked it out yet, please, I'll make sure to link it in the show notes. But it's a fantastic podcast for someone that's really interested in getting into the nitty-gritty of tax law and specific topics. So that's great. But you run a CPA, you run your CPA tax firm, EA firm, and you also have something for HVAC people, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Okay. Well. Thank you for circling me back to that point I made about what actually was working when I was in academia, because yeah, the teaching part of it I really enjoyed. I got a lot out of that. My mom's a teacher. Her dad was a teacher. Like it's in the blood. The teaching part was. Always good from academia, but like I said, it was those one-on-one interactions, and that carries over into, as you said, client work, for sure, right? Because a lot of times when we're meeting with clients, those conversations quickly turn into a situation where we're not just an accountant anymore. Suddenly we find ourselves being a counselor, a coach, maybe even a therapist, right?
I
You
call
know, and
myself the therapist's therapist, because they come to me all
yeah.
scared of tax and they say, "Don't worry about it. Let's talk this through. We'll figure it out."
Yeah. And, a lot of times those fears are more grounded in something else going on in their lives, right? It's easy to just focus on, I need to figure out how to cut my tax bill because, right, we've got these other uncertainties going on in life, or we've got these other financial issues we're trying to deal with. Or, sometimes you wind up talking to one spouse of a married couple, and something comes out in that conversation where you find out things are a little rocky at home, right? And now they've got that on their mind, and that's why they've been pushing you to get the return done so quickly, because they might need to start some divorce proceedings here pretty soon. And so
Yeah.
the conversation can just go a million different directions, and you never know where. And that's how a lot of those office hours conversations would be, is someone, a student would come into my office, and I would think, I would remember, oh yeah, they didn't do too well in that last exam, they're probably here to complain about the grade they got. And I would find out, that their significant other from high school just dumped them, and now they don't know what they're doing, and they can't get into the Greek house that they want to get into, and all kinds of just yeah. So for sure. And like you said, that also applies to the networking that we do, at conferences, where we get to know each other it's not necessarily a better way. It's just a different way from how we would online. You're right. Online, there's a lot of context that's missing. And it's nice to supplement that with the way, we interact in person with each other.
Yeah,
Okay.
whenever I send
Yeah.
messages to people, I always feel like I inclined to send lots of emojis to make sure they know that I'm not upset at them for some reason. Lots of smiley faces, like even maybe I'm giving them some feedback or something, and I'll be like, smiley face, smiley face, smiley face, because I'm doing this as your friend. If this was in person, it would make so much more sense. But it sounds so,
I'm I'm in a WhatsApp
crude.
group and with a bunch of other accountants, and the other day the conversation
Yeah.
started turning toward the generational differences of how we interpret emojis, because apparently the younger generations are interpreting them differently from the
Yes.
way the older generations might. So for example, for me, if you send me something and I agree with it, or I think that's a good point, or I approve of whatever you're saying, I'm going to give that a thumbs up. Apparently for some people a thumbs up is a sarcastic, almost cynical way of saying no, right, you're wrong. I don't like that. It's more of like a all right, fine. And so I don't know. Yeah, I think whatever we can do, whatever we can add to our written communication to sort of supplement, like you said, that
Yes.
that context of the facial expressions, the body movements, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so day to day, speaking of, so I, the, my technical title is COO and head of tax, although most days that feels a bit aspirational. Maybe someday I'll actually do that kind of work, but not yet. I do a little bit of that kind of work in our firm. But so back to, the autobiography of myself. So, like I said, through the pandemic, I was running my own firm, mostly solo that whole time. I had a couple contractors, a couple of VAs, a couple of bookkeepers working for me. But as far as doing the tax work, that was just me the whole time. And I was starting to get a little burnt out on that. The pandemic was tough. Pandemic was tough on everybody, but
Yeah.
especially being solo, especially having clients that, I had several clients that struggled and several clients that did really well. And in ways, they were both challenging. Right. The ones that struggled really needed help with lifelines, and things had to get filed on time, and forgiveness applications had to get filed on time. But then the ones who are doing well, there's always that it, it, when you have that kind of financial success that quickly, like a lot of my clients did during COVID. I worked with a particular set of niches that actually, the pandemic was a boon to their
Yeah.
industries, right? I
Yeah.
worked with a lot of like online coaches, business coaches, course creators, content creators. Well, the pandemic, everybody's at home. That kind of stuff took off, right?
Right.
And so
Right.
now they've got the opposite problem, right? They've got so much money coming in that they don't know what actually having to pay taxes feels like. They don't know what making estimated taxes feels like. And even though I'm telling them they need to do this, they're not taking it seriously because they've never had to deal with it before.
Right.
And that was a little bit challenging too. And so there were a lot of expectations that weren't met in terms of, I thought hiring an accountant meant I didn't have to pay taxes, right? Like, why, where are all the secret deductions about? Where are all
Exactly.
the
That
secret
only the
tax
rich
saving
people
strategies?
know about.
Yeah, exactly, right. And
Now that
no,
I'm
it's not
rich, I
really
should know them.
exactly right. So anyway, that was a challenging period. I was starting to get a little burnt out being solo. So uh, throughout 2023, I want to say about mid 2023, my now business partner, Andrea McDonald, she's a CPA in Virginia, she tweeted about uh, just what, for those of you who have taken on a partner, what did that look like? She was just kind of getting the conversation started. In her mind, she was feeling similarly to how I was, started getting a little burnt out on being solo, even though she'd been doing it a little bit longer than I had at that point. But starting to get a little burnt out on solo, wondering what partnership would look like, wondering what growing a firm looked like, and doubting whether it was possible to do that just individually, right? And it just so happened that we were both kind of thinking on the same wavelength, and we were going back and forth in Twitter DMs pretty much the second half of 2023, occasionally, not constantly, but just every now and then we kind of strike that conversation back up. Well, then in late 2023, I got a message from her saying, and this was a week before New Year's, so I mean this was around Christmas time, and she said that my tax manager, her tax manager, had just turned in her notice because she wanted to go back to the Big Four firm that she had been working at a couple of years before she started working for her. So she was going right into tax season with basically no tax professional working with her. It was just her. There were a couple others on that staff who had done some preparation, but nobody that could, fully prepare a return, review a return, feel good about it. It was just going to be on her. So I said, you know what, we've been talking about partnership for a long time. Let's just look at what that would, look like. And so we started up a shared Google Doc and just started outlining all of the pros, cons, questions, concerns, things we would need to hash out. And we did that pretty much all of January, and first week of February, we signed the paperwork to merge our firms together. And so that's how we became Steadfast Bookkeeping now. So back in May
So that's
of
really interesting
23,
because
yeah,
I've
I
been
know.
following Andrea on social media for all this time, and I had no idea that she was your
Yeah.
business partner.
Yeah. So she had been running her firm, I want to say for almost 10, I'll get this wrong, 7, 8, maybe closer to 10 years in Virginia as pro tax and accounting. She acquired Steadfast Bookkeeping, which was actually it's funny, it was founded in the same county that we live in here in Northeast Florida, that my family does, St. Johns County, Florida. But she found that firm, through one of those listings, and acquired it. And so she was running that for about 6 months when, and thought she was ready for tax season. And then her tax manager turned in notice at the last minute. And so, I merged in February of 24. Right. So for a while there, it felt like we were three different firms all kind of operating under one roof, because there was Andrea's way of doing things under, her old firm. There was my way of doing things with, the firm and my clients that I was bringing in. And then there was the Steadfast way of doing things, which is the firm she acquired. And that was the branding, right, that Andrea decided, and then eventually we all decided to stick with. And so it was a bit of a struggle through most of 2024, trying to figure out how do we consolidate all of this. We had some staff that weren't happy about being part of all of this shakeup. We had some clients, obviously, weren't happy about all of that. So, we made some changes to the staff. We made some changes to the client roster. We made a lot of changes to our processes and ways of doing things. And then we came into 2025, finally, right? This last 8 or 9 months, now 9 months, it's felt like we've actually had just one firm operating on one set of principles. Now, that said, it's a partnership between me and Andrea, and, we still have things that, come up every now and then, and she would do it one way, I'd do it a different way. We figured out ways of handling that. She and I will have a private conversation, we'll hash it out. Or, if it's part of our initial agreement was, so her official title is CEO and head of accounting. My official title is COO and head of tax. So you can imagine, if it's an accounting related thing, I pretty much defer to her. And if it's a tax related thing, she still, usually will tell me what, how she would do it. But for the most part, she'll defer to me when it really comes down to it, because at the end of the day, I'm the one that's got to do that work. I'm the one that's got to sign that return. Right. So,
Right.
and we found a pretty good working relationship of doing that. And so, my day-to-day work, to get around to answering your question is, just pretty much two sets of things. One is trying to help Andrea as much as I can to keep the day-to-day stuff out of her way, off of her desk. I take the COO title as seriously as I can. Andrea it's still her firm, right? Like, she still very much wants to be involved. She's the one ultimately that's going to answer to the client. That we agreed that's part of her job description, is maintaining those client relationships, forging them with new clients, maintaining them with existing clients. So, the entire firm has to be working well in order for her to be able to do her job. So she's still very interested in the day to day, but the knucklehead stuff, the making sure things are getting getting filed on time, making sure that, the monthly closes are getting done on time. We've got a great accounting manager, Jessica, working for us. She does a great job running the accounting department. I pretty much operate as a tax manager also. I review all the returns. I still prepare a lot of returns. But we've got a great preparer working for us, Matthew Cordes. Now, Matthew came to us is similar to the way I was feeling. He'd been running his firm. He's an enrolled agent. He had been running his firm for, I want to say, about 10 years, and was starting to get burnt out, not on the work, not on the actual tax work, but just on all the work of running a business, as solo. And so he was looking for a way to still do the work that he wanted to do, but not have that burden of running the office. And so we were very lucky to be able to bring him on for us. He's been preparing returns. We're now working on getting a couple of our junior staff to the point to where they can start doing the data entry, the initial preparation, and we can move Matthew into more of a reviewer role and get me out of being in that reviewer role so that I can focus on bigger picture. We're starting to get clients that are interested in more of the higher level sort of tax planning, tax strategy services. So trying to free up some capacity for that. And then also just be able to, I have not, for the last year and a half that, we've been one firm, I have not worked much with our accounting side. And so part of the arrangement with me and Andrea was that that head of accounting and head of tax would be more provisional, right? Splitting up we don't want to think of our firm as two different departments that work independently of each other. We really want the accounting and the tax to flow with each other. And I think for that, you really need one person that's overseeing both. Don't treat them as siloed operations in the same firm, treat them as one and the same thing. So eventually my goal is, here probably within the next year or so, is to be able to work myself out of being focused so much on tax and be able to focus more holistically on the entire firm and
Nice.
helping my clients. But yeah, so that's the firm work that I do. And then, like you mentioned, I've also got the podcast. Blake Oliver at Earmark, he's done, and he and David have done a phenomenal job building up Earmark and providing what to me is I love podcasts. I love listening to podcasts. I hate sitting through webinars. Now, this is somebody who has taught webinars. This is somebody who's done online teaching, both in an academic context and, in this profession. But when it's a live webinar, you don't have any control over the speed. You can't pause anything, right? When it's a podcast, I can play that at 1.5x, 2x. I can do that while I'm working out. I can do that while I'm washing dishes. I can do that while I'm just taking a walk around the neighborhood. I can do that anytime. And so I've always enjoyed podcasting. I always loved that medium. And Blake reached out to me about a year ago and said that Earmark was getting requests. They do a lot of good tax topics. They cover that with some of their webinars. They've got a couple of good tax podcasts. Federal Tax Updates is one, but Federal Tax Updates isn't really, it's not so much a show about tax law, right? It's about, I consider it more about, owning and operating a tax firm in the world today. Blake said they were getting more and more requests for show focusing on actual tax law. And so we talked about it for a while, ended up putting together Tax in Action, which is every other week you get one CE, so about 50 to 55 minutes of me breaking down a particular tax topic and really diving into what the IRC, the Treasury regulations, IRS guidance, court decisions, and I try to focus that on a real world, or at least a realistic, if I've got to make up a case study, I'll do that, but I try to make it as realistic as possible because as the name implies, Tax in Action, we're trying to think about, what does this actually look like from the perspective of somebody running a tax firm? Because knowing and understanding tax law is good. It's important. It's critical to the work we're doing. But sometimes we've just got to get the return prepared. Sometimes we've just got to get an answer to the client. Sometimes we've just got to advise them on what the right thing to do is. And we can't just cite the code and regulations to them and then say that we've done our job. We have to actually advise them in terms they can understand, right? So I try to always make that a focus of that show as well. But that's been really fun.
That's really cool. It's funny you say that also. So I've been helping a friend of mine study for one of the EA exams. And one of the things I said was that when you study for something like the EA, it's very theoretical the way it's taught usually. But the thing is, 99.99% of what we do is extremely practical. It's a form being filled out line by line that needs to get filed with an agency. And so I love that you're going ahead and taking that same idea of let's tax in action, and actually bringing it somewhere. I'm
Absolutely.
so happy, by the way, that you gave that breakdown of your firm, because it's really great to just in general hear that progression. It's not every day that it's really easy to see successful firm owners without knowing the struggles and contentions that went into figuring that out. So it's great, you put together your Google Doc, weighed out the pros and cons. I also feel like I'm getting tax Twitter lore right now, because I've now that you mentioned Matthew's name, I'm like, I also follow him too. And so I wonder if there's any, like, y'all are in the office, you're like, okay, let's coordinate some posts, or maybe not. I don't know. Maybe y'all just do your
Yeah.
own thing.
So every morning at 10:30 Eastern, with our staff is all virtual. There are 9 of us, Andrea, me, and then 7 others. And every morning at 10:30 Eastern, we use Google Workspace in our firm. So we get on a Google Meet call,
Nice.
and that's our stand up. And so we'll go around. We always go in alphabetical order by first name, but we'll give our 3 MITs, or most important things for the day. And then if there's anything that we're struggling with, we need help with, and we can identify, hey, so and so, I need you to talk to the client and figure this out, because the thing I'm working on is waiting on that. So let's help each other out, that kind of thing. So it gives us an opportunity to just connect. And we try to keep that to about, ideally about 5 to 10 minutes. Sometimes if there's, a particularly big issue with a client or something like that, it'll turn into 10 to 15 minutes. And then sometimes we'll break off and have side conversations, to discuss something a little bit further. But we really try to keep that to 5 or 10 minutes. And sometimes leading up to that call, we will get on a few minutes early and be like, hey, I saw that thing you posted last night or this morning. But that's always fun. But yeah, no, to your point, we joke, Andrew and I joke about how you watch TV shows, right? Especially the like lawyer ones or the business ones. Think like Suits, right?
Yeah.
The one about the New York attorneys, right? And you think business deals go like that, right? Like everybody comes in these $1,000 suits, and they're passing files, manila folders back and forth, and people are signing things, and they're negotiating. It's all cutthroat and everything. And here we were just going back over and forth over a few months in Twitter DMs, and then a Google Doc, a big outline in a Google Doc. And that's how we decided to merge our firms, right? It was like
Like
the most
real
low key.
humans.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. It was the most low key business negotiation I think there ever was. But I love it. I love what we have been able to do over the last 18 months together. I love the firm that we're building. We have consolidated a lot of processes. Changed a lot of things, I think, to the benefit of our clients and our staff. We found a lot of duplicate softwares that we were using. We were using 2 different practice managers at the same time. The accounting staff liked one, the tax staff liked the other. The tax staff liked the other one because it had the portal built into it, but it was still a practice management software. So we were sitting there looking at it like, why are we using 2 different practice management softwares, right? We can just use the one, right? So we made some good consolidations, some good moves there. And yeah, I really feel like we're in a position now to where we've honed in. We still got a few things to figure out, but we're really in a position now to where we can start scaling this thing up and bring some more clients on, and looking at growing this firm.
That's great.
Yeah, it's fun times. I don't think, based on my own experience, but then also, what I've seen a lot of others discussing online. I know Mike Sylvester is a you'll see him tweet this every now and then, but there's never been a better time to be in this profession, right? We've got an incredibly complicated set of tax laws, federally and at the state level, right? Most states' tax systems that have one, are pretty complex, and at the same time, technologically, it's able for people have the ability to make money, whether it's through businesses or through out of state jobs or side hustles or whatever. People just have the ability to get involved in businesses or making money or transactions or whatever that are just going to be, just by their nature, complicated, and they're going to need help, or they're going to try to do it on their own and they're going to mess it up and they're going to get in trouble and they're going to need help getting out of trouble, right? So if you're a capable, competent tax professional and you're working in a big firm, right, and you're not happy with time tracking, you're not happy with 60-hour weeks during busy season, all that kind of stuff, man, all you need is, from my perspective, and I'm not pushing Intuit here, right? But really, bare minimum, you just set yourself up with an Intuit account. Now you've got a QuickBooks Online Advisor account. You've got a ProConnect Tax account. You've got an accounting firm, right? Just go get your EFIN. You're ready to go.
Yep.
And so it's never been easier, and I think there's really no reason, if you're capable, if you're willing to take on just that little bit of risk of doing it on your own, I think it's a great time to do it.
That's awesome. Yeah, real quick, a couple rapid fire questions I ask my guests. Dark mode or light mode?
Oh, dark, 100%. Yeah.
Dark mode. Windows or Mac?
Oh, Mac. Yeah.
Okay, we are
those
very
two
different.
go together, right? Like Mac and dark mode.
That is true. I guess.
Space gray all the way, man.
One is based on the other. Okay,
Yeah,
coffee or tea?
The older I get, the more sensitive my system. So it's starting to shift toward tea. I still love a good cup of coffee, but I overdo it with coffee. I can't just drink one cup. It ends up being like 2 or 3 cups, and then I'm regretting it an hour later. So yeah, definitely tea now.
Okay, and then when you're not doing all these amazing things, running your tax firm, doing your podcast, what do you do for fun?
Ooh, well, the one little bit of I exercise, so I'm actually training for a half marathon now. I'll probably not do very well in that, but yeah, I enjoy running, and then I watch Chelsea football, soccer team in London, and they've had a rough few years, but they're coming back. I think this is going to be a better year for us. But yeah, I love watching soccer.
That's great. That's awesome. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate you coming on the show. And I look forward to seeing you in person and online. And everybody, please go check out, I'll post Jeremy's socials in the description below. But please go check out everything Jeremy has to offer to the tax community and keep on meeting new people. Thank you so much, Jeremy. Thanks for listening to The People Behind the Books. Want to join me on a future episode? Send an email to thepeoplebehindthebooks@gmail.com. No W-9 required. If you enjoyed this episode, hit follow and leave a 5-star rating. It costs $0 and is fully deductible in the category of making my day. The People Behind the Books, because every accountant counts.